My name is Reba Walker. I'm 31 years old. And this is the story of how my family took everything I had, over $250,000, and then voted me out like I was never part of them. But on Christmas morning, I gave them something they never expected, the truth. It started in a modest wooden house near the pine forests just outside Minneapolis. I was the oldest of 3 siblings. Growing up, I believed in fairy tales, not the ones with glass slippers or castles, but the kind where love was stronger than loss, and family always found its way back to each other. I used to think I was the glue holding everyone together. But looking back now, I was just the one patching all the cracks while everyone else kept hammering nails into the walls. When I was 16, everything shattered. My father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who used to whistle old jazz tunes while fixing leaky pipes, packed a suitcase and disappeared into a new life in Arizona with a woman who wasn't my mother. His leaving didn't just break us financially. It broke my mother's heart, and with it, the last traces of warmth in our home. She changed overnight. The woman who used to read to us from weathered library books and bake lemon muffins on Sundays became cold, sharp, and silent. She stopped telling bedtime stories. Stopped smiling at dinner. Her voice, when she did speak, had one mantra: family is everything, Reba. We only have each other now. I believed her. Even when she remarried a dull-eyed insurance man named Frank who never looked anyone in the eyes. Even when she began treating my younger sister, Chloe, like royalty and me like the unpaid housemaid. Chloe was the golden child, 3 years younger, all blonde curls and dimples. Liam, 6 years younger than me, was the baby of the family. The world owed him softness, while I was expected to be made of stone. After Dad left, I buried myself in school. I'd wake at 5 in the morning to study, scrub floors before class, and work weekends at a diner just to afford books. I poured all my pain into grades and ambition, not because I wanted medals, but because I needed to be free. And it worked. I earned a full scholarship to the University of Wisconsin-Madison and landed a job straight out of college at a finance firm in Chicago. I should have finally had my life. But what I got instead was a leash wrapped in obligation. It started small. Reba, Chloe's car broke down and tuition is due. Could you maybe help, just this once? That was the first $2,500. Reba, Liam found this great online course for app development. It's only $1,600. I paid. Reba, the property tax is due and we're short. Frank's hours got cut again. I paid. Every time I answered the phone, there was another emergency. But not once did anyone call just to ask how I was doing. Still, I gave. Because that's what daughters do when they're told we only have each other. But what really broke me wasn't the money. It was the lies that came wrapped in gratitude. Like the time I wired $22,000, my entire savings, after Mom claimed the house was about to be foreclosed. When I visited weeks later, the floors had been replaced with polished oak, and she served tea from porcelain imported from Italy. It was on sale, she said, smiling. We have to live a little, right? Chloe was in grad school at the time. Then one day, she called to announce she was engaged to a man I'd never met. We're getting married by Lake Superior. Grand Marais is stunning. The venue's expensive, but worth it. Before I could say anything, Mom emailed me the entire wedding budget, $33,000, with an $8,000 dress at the top. And like a fool, I paid. At the wedding, I sat near the kitchen, at a table with distant cousins. Chloe toasted Mom. Toasted Frank. Toasted her in-laws. Not one mention of me. That night, I returned alone to my motel and ate a dry turkey sandwich in silence. Then came Liam's startup. A freelancing app just for students. He needed $15,000. I reviewed his so-called business plan, 3 crumpled pages with gems like competition, none and market, very big. I knew it was a fantasy, but I still opened my retirement fund and withdrew the money. He swore it was an interest-bearing loan. I'd see a return. Of course, the app vanished into the digital ether within months. By the time I turned 30, I'd become invisible. I celebrated my birthday alone, eating cup noodles with a candle stuck in the lid. I emailed the photo to myself with the subject, "Birthday of the Unwanted." And still, they asked for more. But something inside me snapped the night I arrived early to a summer dinner and overheard laughter on the back patio. I stood just beyond the sliding door and listened. Chloe was giggling. "She's probably getting another fat bonus this year," she said, clinking her glass. "Over 20 grand, right?" Mom chuckled. "If we play it right, we might get that lake house in Ely." Frank chimed in. "With what money?" "Reba," Mom said simply. "If she hears emergency, she'll send it. Always does." They all laughed. Always does. I left without a word, wine bottle still in hand. Drove back to Chicago with numb fingers and burning eyes. I didn't cry. I just opened my laptop and started a file. I labeled it the red folder. I documented everything. Every transaction. Every excuse. Screenshots, dates, subject lines like urgent and help please. Each lie. Each manipulation. The total was $258,400. That was the money I could prove. I kept the folder for months, a silent witness to every sacrifice they'd erased. I wasn't planning revenge. Not then. But I knew one thing: if I didn't change, they never would. 3 days after Christmas, I returned. But this time, I wasn't carrying mashed potatoes or a smile. Just a red folder. And a boundary no one could break. Frank answered the door. His face froze the moment he saw me, like he wasn't sure if I was real or a ghost from the other side of their guilt. "Reba," he said, almost cautiously, like I might explode. I didn't. I stepped inside, no smile, no greetings, just the quiet weight of someone who's no longer willing to play the family fool. The house was still, like it hadn't recovered from Christmas 3 days prior. The lights were off, the dishes half done, a faint smell of pine and stale wine in the air. Chloe sat curled up on the living room chair, scrolling through her phone, legs tucked under a blanket like she was in her own private cocoon. Liam was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, clearly annoyed I hadn't called first. Mom emerged from the hallway, hair pulled back, her face hard. No hugs. No warm welcome. Just 4 people who looked like they'd been caught mid-con. I sat down at the glass dining table and placed the red folder on top like it was a final will. They watched it like it might detonate. "I'm not here to fight," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'm here to talk." "Then leave." No one said a word. Mom slowly took the seat across from me, her eyes narrowing. Chloe stared blankly. Liam scoffed and muttered something under his breath, but I ignored him. I opened the folder and pulled out the first page. A 7-year financial log. Names. Dates. Bank records. Transfers. Receipts. Venmo notes with crying face emojis. Subject lines like "Please, Reba" and "It's just this one time." I laid them down one by one like cards on a poker table. "This," I said, "is $261,800. Verified. Documented. And not a single repayment." "You kept track?" Chloe asked, incredulous. "I kept records," I corrected. "Because you all taught me I had to." I turned to Mom. 3 property tax emergencies. I covered them. Yet that same month, you upgraded the kitchen and bought a brand new sofa. "Reba," she started, but I held up a hand. "I'm not finished." I turned to Chloe. "Your tuition. Your wedding. That custom-made dress." I sat in the back row. "I wasn't even mentioned in your speech." Her lips parted, but I could see the panic behind her eyes. Then Liam. I pulled out the crumpled business plan he'd once handed me like a golden ticket. You wanted 15 grand for this. I gave it to you. You promised to repay it monthly. Startups don't always succeed, he muttered. No, I said. But real entrepreneurs take responsibility. They don't ghost their investors. He bristled at the word. Investor? You're my sister. And you used that to justify theft, I snapped. The room went still. Then I placed down the photographs. A cabin deed in Chloe's and her husband's name. A printout of Mom's credit card charges at the casino. A grainy surveillance shot of her walking out at 3 a.m., clutching her purse. I looked her in the eye. That same week, you told me you needed $10,000 for emergency medical bills. Her mouth opened and closed. No denial. Just shame curling her shoulders inward. You hired someone to follow me, she finally whispered. No, I said. I hired someone to follow the money. I reached into my bag and placed 3 white envelopes on the table. Each labeled with their names. Inside are agreements drafted by my attorney, I said calmly. They outline repayment terms based on your income. They're legal. Enforceable. And they also include therapy clauses, because this isn't just about money. It's about what you did to me. How you made me believe that being family meant being used. Frank cleared his throat. And what if we don't sign? I looked him dead in the eye. Then I sue. Minnesota allows civil action in cases of familial fraud and fiduciary exploitation. And I have more than enough proof. That folder is bulletproof. Chloe scoffed. You'd really drag us into court? On paper? Over family? No, I replied. You dragged yourselves here the moment you turned love into a transaction. Mom leaned forward, voice shaking. You think I'm proud of this? Of asking you again and again? Her voice broke. It started small. Then I lost control. I kept thinking I'd win it back. I'd fix it. But I didn't. I just lost more. She looked older then. Not in years, in spirit. Like the lie had finally broken its mask. I didn't just lose money, she whispered. I lost the only daughter who ever truly gave. The room fell into silence again. I gently slid a printed registration form across the table. Compulsive Gambling Support Group at St. Paul's Church. Her name already filled in. I'm not doing this to destroy you, I said softly. I'm doing this so you stop destroying me. With that, I stood up. You have 30 days to respond, I said, gathering the folder. This time, the deadline's mine. And I walked out. No one chased me. No one called my name. They just sat there in the silence they had created, and I let them. Back in Chicago, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally standing on solid ground. Alone, yes. But whole. I cut contact entirely. Blocked numbers. Filtered emails. It was like detox. The silence felt strange at first, like I was missing a limb. But then it began to feel right. Like I'd taken my first breath after drowning. I started therapy. A warm-smiled woman named Karen who never told me what to feel, just let me unpack everything in my own time. I feel guilty, I admitted once. I left them. And I still feel like I'm wrong. Karen leaned forward, gentle but firm. You were taught that love means giving until it hurts. But love without respect isn't love at all. It's control. That session changed something in me. I opened a new bank account. For myself. A house savings account. For the first time in years, I put money aside not to help someone else, but to build something for me. I burned cinnamon-scented candles in the evening. And I slept. For real. The red folder stayed in my drawer. But now, it wasn't a wound. It was proof. Proof that I had endured. That I had survived. That I was free. 30 days passed. Then 45. I didn't hear anything directly, not from Chloe, not from Liam, and definitely not from Mom. But my lawyer did. He called me one afternoon while I was walking through Millennium Park, where the wind always seemed to cut right through your coat no matter how thick it was. His voice was measured. Your mother signed the agreement. I stopped walking. She signed it? Every page. She even included a handwritten note. Not for you, for the file. But it shows she's taking it seriously. She's enrolled in the gambling support group. Already attended 3 sessions. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then I whispered, "Thank you," before hanging up. That night, I found myself pulling out the old red folder from the bottom drawer. Not to relive the pain, but to reflect on what it took to finally say, enough. I carefully transferred the documents into a new box, labeled simply, Legal Archive. I didn't cry, but I did light one of those cinnamon candles, like a quiet ritual of closure. Weeks later, my lawyer emailed again. Subject, Liam Walker, response. I opened it with a racing heart, expecting arrogance, excuses, maybe even anger. But what I found instead was a typed letter, clumsy but honest. Liam admitted he'd never followed through on anything before. Admitted he had been riding my kindness like a paycheck. He included proof of enrollment in a vocational course, office equipment repair. Not glamorous, but real. And attached, a full repayment schedule. I blinked at the screen, stunned. My baby brother, the same boy who used to sneak cookies before dinner and send me Venmo requests labeled emergency, again, was growing up. 2 months later, my attorney confirmed Liam had gotten a full-time job in St. Cloud. Office technician for a mid-sized logistics company. Not flashy. Not high-paying. But for once, stable. Responsible. I sat in my favorite corner cafe that day, watching snow swirl outside the window like feathers caught in a breeze. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The peace was enough. Then came Chloe. Her response was different. She signed the repayment agreement. But with it, she sent a 4-page email. The first paragraph apologized. The second blamed me. You always made me feel small, she wrote. You were the scholarship girl. The career woman. The one who did everything first, best, and without breaking a sweat. I asked you for help because I knew you wouldn't say no. Because part of me believed that if I didn't matter in achievement, maybe I could matter in need. She called me intimidating. Said I'd never understand what it was like being in my shadow. That every time Mom praised me, which was rare, by the way, it felt like a slap to her. I read it once. Then again. And instead of responding, I closed the browser. Not out of anger. Out of understanding. Because I finally realized something, Chloe wasn't trying to heal. She was trying to reframe her guilt into victimhood. And I wouldn't carry that weight for her anymore. Refusing to change is a choice. And when someone chooses to stay broken rather than get better, that's not your fault. That's their comfort zone. I didn't respond. Instead, I took another step forward in my own life. I found a modest apartment on the 3rd floor of a red brick building in South Minneapolis. 2 bedrooms. A tiny balcony that overlooked Lake Nokomis. In the morning, the light poured through the windows like honey. I planted rosemary and lavender in old clay pots. Bought a simple coffee maker. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. For the first time since college, my money stayed mine. No more panicked texts. No more guilt-laced voicemails. No more family emergencies that conveniently aligned with shopping sprees. The silence became beautiful. Sacred. Healing. I joined a Thursday night book club at the library. Something I'd told myself I'd do someday for 5 years. We sat in a circle, 10 strangers talking about stories, emotions, life. That's where I met Ethan. He was in his late 30s, an architect with kind eyes and a voice that always sounded like it had more to say. Divorced. Quiet. Thoughtful. We didn't flirt. We listened. At first, we didn't talk about our pasts. We just walked around the lake, through parks, past bookstores and closed cafes. Slowly, the silence between us became something soft. Comforting. You don't talk much about your family, he said one day. I paused, then looked him in the eye. I used to be the one everyone leaned on, I said. But no one ever leaned back. He didn't push. He didn't ask for the whole story. He just took my hand. That was enough. I started a new folder, this time not red. Just a plain white binder. Inside, I placed a copy of Mom's handwritten note after her 5th therapy session. Liam's first paycheck stub. A photo of my new apartment with the light streaming through the curtains. And a thank you card from a women's financial recovery group I'd started volunteering at. That's where I met Ellie. She was quiet. Gentle. Could barely speak above a whisper. She shared during one meeting that her ex-husband used to say, "You only have money because I let you." She believed that for 10 years. After the meeting, I walked up to her and handed her a small note. 3 lines. I was taken advantage of too. I stayed silent too. But we don't have to live that way. At the bottom, I wrote my email. She messaged me 3 days later. 10 days after that, she sent me a photo of herself outside a law office's divorce papers in hand, red-eyed but smiling. I printed that photo and added it to the white binder. Another tiny branch. Watered by courage. As spring approached, I was beginning to feel light again. Not happy. Not always. But free. And freedom, that's better than happy. The email came on a quiet morning in late March. Subject, a meeting. Proposal. I was planting a new mint sprig on my tiny balcony, the sun not yet fully awake, when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it. Most emails that early are junk or promotional coupons I never asked for. But this one was from Chloe. "If you're open to it," she wrote, "I think it's time for the family to sit down." Neutral. Civil. I read it 3 times. Then left it unread for 2 more days. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to hold on to that connection anymore, or let it dissolve completely like sugar in black coffee. But eventually, after hours of sitting in quiet thought, I replied with 3 clear conditions. 1. We meet in a public, quiet place. 2. Everyone pays for their own meal. 3. No talk of money, past, present, or future. 1 violation, and I walk out. I didn't think they'd agree. But they did. Each one responded with a single word, agreed. I chose the restaurant, a small, family-owned Italian place overlooking the Mississippi River. Not trendy, not fancy. But warm, with soft music and staff who didn't hover. The kind of place where the food is seasoned with soul and the silence doesn't feel like a threat. Chloe arrived first. She wore a long forest green coat, walked quickly, and avoided eye contact. She muttered hello, then busied herself with the menu like it held secrets. Liam came next. He looked nervous, his smile a little too tight, his shirt slightly wrinkled. He nodded to me, said hey, and sat down. Frank and Mom arrived last. Mom looked thinner than I remembered. She'd aged. But not in the sad way, more like she'd let something go. The tension in her shoulders was gone. She didn't look angry or ashamed, just present. Frank, as always, was quiet. But for the first time in years, His presence didn't bother me. We didn't order right away. For a long moment, none of us said anything. Then Chloe cleared her throat. "So, how have you been?" It was awkward. Stiff. But not fake. I gave a small nod. "Better. Working. Reading a lot." Liam jumped in. I've been fixing printers." That made me laugh. A short, surprised sound. And for a moment, it softened the edges around us all. We ordered our meals. No one argued over prices. No one glanced at my plate like I owed them something. The waitress brought fresh bread. We broke it without ceremony. Mom asked about my job. I gave general updates. Chloe mentioned a yoga class. Liam shared that he'd fixed the copy machine at work and didn't even have to YouTube it. I said, "Nice," and meant it. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was simple. Normal. For the first time in maybe a decade, we had a meal together where no one demanded anything from me. No requests. No guilt. No sudden turns toward debt or drama. Just dinner. When the check came, everyone paid their own bill. It sounds small. But to me, it was massive. A quiet revolution. As we stepped outside, the river shining under the dusk light, I turned to them and said, "Thank you for coming." Mom reached out. Not for a hug, just a hand on my arm. Her fingers were cool, trembling slightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not leaving me, even when I left you first." I didn't pull away. But I didn't say, "I forgive you" either. Some things take time. And I wasn't going to rush healing for anyone's comfort, not even hers. On the way home, I didn't overthink. I didn't analyze every word, or question every pause. What I knew, what mattered, was this: I had set a boundary, and they had respected it. That's the thing about boundaries. People think they're about building walls. But they're really about building doors, doors that only open when trust is earned. Back in my apartment, I made myself a cup of tea and sat on my tiny balcony. The mint sprig I planted was already stretching toward the sun. The rosemary smelled fresh. The air was cool, but not cruel. I thought about the red folder. How it once held every scar they'd left. And now, in its place, I had something new. A white binder full of steps forward. Proof that people can change, if they choose to. If they're willing to crawl through the discomfort and do the work. I don't know where things go from here. But I know where I stand. Firmly. Finally. As someone who is no longer for sale. Someone who has nothing to prove. Someone who has stopped paying the emotional bill for everyone else's damage. My story used to be about pain. Now, it's about power, not over others, but over myself. I don't need revenge. I just need peace. And I'm building it, one quiet Thursday night at a time. A week after that dinner, I received a plain envelope in the mail with no return address. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a small handwritten note on linen-textured paper. Reba. I'm attending group therapy twice a week. The bookstore job is humble. But it's mine. I haven't gambled in 84 days. I know I can't rewrite the past. But I'm trying to be someone you'd be willing to speak to. Mom. There was no signature. No flourish. Just quiet ink and, for once, humility. I didn't cry. But I did take the note and place it in the white binder, not out of sentiment, but acknowledgement. A mile marker on a long road. That same week, I received a payment notification from Liam, $250. The first of what he promised would be many monthly installments. Along with it, a short email. I know this doesn't fix anything. But I'm not going to vanish this time. Not unless you want me to. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Not unless you want me to. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't manipulation. It was accountability. For the first time in my life, I realized Liam might actually want to become his own person, not just Reba's burden. I didn't reply. But I saved the email in a new folder on my desktop titled Repair. I started doing small things for myself that week. Bought new curtains. Signed up for a beginner's painting class. Replaced the mismatched dishes in my kitchen with a simple set of matte blue ceramic bowls and plates. Things that felt like mine. One rainy Saturday, I returned to the financial recovery group and brought along printed resources I'd compiled, free budgeting tools, emotional boundaries worksheets, legal templates for loans among family members. Things I wished I'd had back when I was still trying to save everyone else at the cost of myself. Ellie, the woman who'd emailed me after her divorce, was waiting by the door. She looked different. Not flashy or transformed. Just more solid. Like someone who had finally started taking up space in her own life again. I used your resource list, she said, smiling. Opened a separate checking account. Signed up for therapy. It's slow, but I don't feel like I'm disappearing anymore. I hugged her without thinking. Not because I felt like a savior, but because I knew the feeling of reappearing after being invisible for too long. That evening, I walked home in the drizzle, shoes soaked, hair frizzed, but heart steady. I felt light, not because everything was perfect, but because for once, nothing was crushing me. Ethan texted while I was drying my hair. Coffee tomorrow? Or one of our long, unnecessary walks that we pretend are about cardio? I smiled. We met at the cafe on 43rd Street, the one with the tiny hanging plants and chipped mugs that somehow made it feel more real. We talked for hours. About work, books, quiet anger, and silent hopes. He never tried to fix me. Never offered platitudes. He just listened. That day, for the first time, I told him the whole story. Not just the highlight reel. The real thing. How I gave until I forgot how to receive. How I used to think love meant paying every bill, carrying every emotional weight. How my family taught me to be useful, but never valuable. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. Reba, he said softly. That's not love. That's labor. And just like that, I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. The next morning, I added a new page to my white binder. Not a receipt, not a bank statement, just a blank sheet with the title Things I Deserve. I wrote. Rest. Laughter without guilt. Conversations that aren't negotiations. Money I don't have to explain. Space that doesn't feel borrowed. Relationships built on truth, not debt. It was the first time I'd ever written a list not for others, but for me. A few days later, Mom emailed again. This time with the subject, do you want to come to book club with me? Apparently, the bookstore where she worked hosted a monthly discussion group. Nothing formal. Just a few women in folding chairs talking about whatever they'd read. I thought of you, she wrote. The way you used to read by flashlight when the power went out. The way you used to leave post-it notes in my books saying page 112 is the best. I miss that Reba. I'm trying to be someone she might read to again. It floored me. Not because she was trying, but because she remembered. Remembered the girl who used to sneak books into her math notebook. The girl she hadn't seen in years, because she was too busy turning me into the family's emergency fund. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no. Instead, I wrote, I'll think about it. Thank you for asking. That was enough for now. Because healing doesn't mean returning to what hurt you, it means finding a new way forward. Together, if possible. Alone, if necessary. A few days later, I found an old photograph tucked into one of my childhood books, me, maybe 10 years old, standing next to our old porch in a red jacket with pockets stuffed full of pine cones. My dad had taken the photo. You could see his shadow in the corner of the frame. For a second, I felt that old ache, the one I used to bury. But this time, I didn't feel anger. Just distance. Just the gentle sadness of something no longer needed. I placed that photo in my binder, under a new tab I labeled Roots. Because even if you come from broken soil, it doesn't mean you can't grow into something whole. April came with soft rain and an air of quiet renewal. My balcony herbs thrived. The mint grew wild and unruly, the rosemary stretching upward like it finally believed it could. I was watering them one morning when another email from Liam arrived. Subject, update, real this time. Hey Reba. Just wanted you to know I passed my certification exam. I'm officially certified in small business hardware installation and repair. I also fixed a fax machine last week no one else could figure out. It beeped at me like it was cursed. Also, I paid an extra $100 this month. Not much, but it's real. Thought I'd tell you before you saw it in the statement. Hope you're well. Liam. I reread the message 3 times. Not because it was surprising anymore, but because it felt like a mirror. Like I was finally seeing my brother not through the cracked glass of resentment, but through something healing. And then, unexpectedly, came Chloe. I hadn't heard from her since the last email, the one that blamed me while cloaked as an apology. But now she sent a short message. Mom says you're doing well. I hope that's true. I'd like to meet. Just the 2 of us. No therapy, no money, no drama. Just sisters. You pick the place. I stared at it for a long time. The version of me from a year ago would have deleted it. Blocked her. Maybe even raged about the nerve of her still trying to wedge herself back in. But the version of me now paused. Because maybe, just maybe, she meant it. I picked a coffee shop halfway between our neighborhoods. Neutral territory. I wore jeans, a soft gray sweater, and a necklace I'd bought for myself last month without needing an occasion. I sat at a table by the window and waited. Chloe arrived 5 minutes late, as always. She looked different. Not drastically. Just more subdued. Her usual bright lipstick was replaced with soft balm, her heels traded for flats. She had a paper bag in hand. I brought those cookies you used to like, she said, placing them on the table awkwardly. The hazelnut ones. From Maribel's. I nodded. Thanks. She sat down, smoothed her coat, then fidgeted with a napkin. I don't know how to start, she said finally. I've rehearsed this like 100 times and all the versions sound fake. Then don't rehearse, I said. Just talk. Chloe looked up. And for the first time in years, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't competition, or deflection, or pity. It was fear. Not of me. Of honesty. I was jealous, she said bluntly. For most of my life. Not because you had more. But because you always seemed grounded. Like you knew who you were. Even when Dad left. Even when Mom shut down. You just kept going. And I hated that. She shook her head. I spent years trying to matter. To be someone. I thought if I was helpless, people would need me around. But the more I leaned on you, the less I respected myself. And the more you kept giving, the more I resented that I couldn't stand on my own. I didn't interrupt. I let her say it all. Because that was part of the new me. No longer responsible for managing everyone's emotions. Just there to listen and choose what to keep. I'm seeing someone now, she continued. A therapist. Not because of the agreement. Just because I realized I didn't know how to be anything other than someone else's version of me. She took a breath. I don't expect anything. Not forgiveness. Not sisterhood. I just wanted you to hear that I know I was wrong. I nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that, I said. Chloe looked surprised. That's it? I shrugged gently. What else do you want? Punishment? No, I don't know. I thought it would be more dramatic. I smiled. A quiet, tired smile. I don't need drama anymore, I said. I've had enough for a lifetime. We sipped our coffee in silence. She didn't ask for another chance. I didn't offer one. And yet, there was a mutual understanding that the door, cracked ever so slightly, might one day open. As I walked home that afternoon, I passed a second-hand store with a sign that read, "Let go of what you don't need. Reclaim what you forgot you had." It felt like a message meant for me. That evening, I sat on my couch with the white binder in my lap. I added a page. Just a blank one. No notes. No receipts. Just space. A place for what might still come, not because I owed it to anyone, but because I finally had room. In May, the Women's Financial Recovery Group invited me to speak. Ellie nominated me. I almost said no, afraid I wasn't ready, that my story wasn't finished enough to inspire anyone. But then I realized, that's the point. You don't have to be finished to speak your truth. So I stood before a circle of women, most of them older than me, some younger. And I told them the whole story. Not the polished version. The real one. How I mistook being useful for being loved. How I loaned money like it was a stand-in for affection. How I lost myself, and then found peace in a file folder and a padlocked boundary. And how I now live in a small Minneapolis apartment with cinnamon candles, quiet mornings, and a mint plant that refuses to die. When I finished, the room didn't applaud. It just breathed. One woman wiped her eyes. Another reached out and squeezed my hand. That night, I didn't feel like someone who had been betrayed. I felt like someone who had built something. From rubble. From silence. From herself. The first warm day of June arrived like an unexpected gift. The city buzzed with a kind of quiet joy, windows thrown open, children laughing in the distance, the air alive with the scent of cut grass and something beginning. I spent that morning in my apartment, barefoot, brewing coffee and opening all the windows. The white curtains danced in the breeze, and for once, it felt like the world outside matched how I felt inside, not perfect, not flawless, but free. That afternoon, I got a call from my attorney. Everything's in place, he said. Liam's on schedule with repayments, and Chloe made her first transfer. Your mom has completed a full 90-day streak at the support group and has been volunteering at the bookstore's literacy program. I sat in silence for a moment. Are you okay? He asked. I think I'm proud of them, I said, surprised by my own words. Not because they were perfect now. Not because they'd made it all better. But because they had started. And more importantly, I had stopped. Stopped giving until I bled. Stopped saying yes just to be seen. Stopped defining love by how much I could carry for everyone else. Later that evening, I met Ethan at the park near the lake. We sat on a bench watching the water shimmer beneath the sunset. I told him about the updates. About Chloe's quiet efforts. About Mom shelving books and leading story time for second graders. About Liam fixing a customer's computer and finally, being proud of himself. You helped them change, Ethan said. I shook my head. No. I stopped helping them avoid change. That's what made the difference. He reached into his bag and handed me a small box. You've earned this, he said. I opened it to find a silver key pendant. Nothing flashy. Just simple, strong, and engraved with one word, mine. For your new life, he said softly. Your new door. Your new space. I clutched the pendant tightly. Not because it was expensive. But because it was the first gift in years that didn't come with a hidden cost. I wore it home. That night, I lit a candle, cinnamon, always, and opened the white binder one last time. I added a final page. At the top, I wrote what I gained. And I listed the courage to say no without apology. A quiet home filled with peace instead of performance. Friends who don't expect me to bleed to earn their love. A relationship built on presence, not pain. Myself in full, for the first time. Then I closed the binder. Not because the story was over, but because I was no longer defined by its beginning. A few days later, I returned to that small Italian restaurant by the Mississippi. Not with family this time, but with Ellie and 2 other women from the support group. We talked about freedom, our favorite books, and what it means to reclaim your life, one small decision at a time. And when the check came, we each paid for our own meal. No tension. No glances. Just 4 women who had learned that love doesn't mean losing yourself. It means being seen, completely, and still being enough. Before we left, Ellie turned to me and said, "You know, I used to think strength meant being able to carry everything without breaking. But now, I think it means knowing when to put things down." I smiled. Me too. And I meant it. Now, when people ask me what happened, what made me change, what made me cut off the cycle, I tell them this. It wasn't anger that saved me. It was the quiet. The silence after years of noise. The stillness after decades of being pulled in every direction. That's where I found myself. In the space I made when I stopped making space for everyone else's chaos. So to anyone who feels like they've been turned into an ATM with a heartbeat, who feels invisible in the very family they've sacrificed everything for, I say this. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to step back. You're allowed to be your own person. You don't need to wait for a breaking point. You can choose peace right now. And if they say, family is everything, you can gently reply. Only when it includes me. Reba's story isn't just about betrayal or money. It's about reclaiming identity. About choosing boundaries over blind loyalty. About finally saying, my life matters too. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe it's possible to forgive without forgetting? Have you had to walk away from toxic family ties? Let us know your story, someone out there needs to hear it. And don't forget to follow Revenge Echoes for more powerful stories like this, where silence becomes strength, and truth is the loudest revenge.